name was Lillian Teresa Atkinson. My father was Virgil Guy Atkinson, and my mother was Margaret Camp. Now the Camps came, my mother's family came from Stone Mountain. The reason they moved to Atlanta was because there was no high school, and my grandmother was a school teacher in Stone Mountain. But there was no high school in Stone Mountain at the time, so she insisted they move to Atlanta so her boys could go to boys' high and the girls to girls' high. Then I was born during the Depression, and my father was a night watchman and worked at Grant Park. And Johnny Dillback at that time was in charge of Grant Park and the zoo, which at that time was free. And then we used to have a swimming pool at Grant Park and a lake that you could row boats on. And I had a pavilion where you could get ice cream and so forth. And then my father started his first company, was Atkinson Electric Company. And he worked that during the day and on weekends when he wasn't working as night watchman in Grant Park. And he bought an old bakery truck, and that's how he was starting Atkinson Electric Company. And then he wanted to have bigger, what shall I say, license where he could wire larger buildings. So he went to Georgia Tech and got his master's in electronics, electricity, I should say. And then in Decatur, he had Atkinson Electric Company and Atkinson Bonding Company. And he was very, very close friends with Chief Spinks and his wife, Rudy. Then later, when I was about, my father divorced my mother when I was a very, very small child, so I don't remember her too much, Mary Margaret Camp. So therefore, one I remember as my mother was named Ruth Stallworth Curling, and she never had any children. So we lived out on Peach Street, Dunwoody, and I was not allowed to go to school in Atlanta. My father, being very second degree a Shriner, sent me to Catholic boarding schools. I went to Blessed Sacrament Academy when I was very young in Birmingham, Alabama. That's when I was about 10. I decided I didn't like the name of Lillian, so I changed it myself to Victoria. And legally, about 30 years ago, I had it changed to Victoria Atkinson Bowman, which my first marriage, I was married to a dual Edward King of Dublin, Georgia. At that time, I was going to Wesleyan College to be a commercial artist. I studied art at the High Museum under Ben Schultz and Mrs. Turner. And I remember the first time, I thought we was having fashions, and we had our charcoal out and everything, and we was going to get ready to draw, and we had these benches pads here. And out comes this girl with a house coat on. I said, oh, we're going to have fashions today. Well, she took off the house coat, and she was in the mood. Here I am, still in high school. In the summer months, I was going to the museum to study art. And as I say, under Ben Schultz. And I said, I wouldn't look. I just kept trying to draw it, but wouldn't look at it. So Mrs. Schultz stopped the class, because I was probably one of the youngest ones in this class, to explain the components, the shadows, the things of the nude body. And then we had to go see the High Museum, all the gorgeous old paintings of nudes and so forth.
Now this is when it was still in the High House, right?
I beg your pardon?
This is when the High Museum was still in the High House.
Yes. And right up above the High Museum, they used to have the Federated Women's Club building. It had a swimming pool and all, too. We used to slip off and go up there swimming sometimes. And I rode, we used to have streetcars in Atlanta when I was very young, but when I used to walk from Peachtree, Dunwoody, which we lived in, where Club and Carter comes in, we had 19 acres. We had horse stables and so forth on there. But we lived a mile from Peachtree. And on the other side of Peachtree was Roxborough Road. It didn't go across. And then I remember when I was very young, where Lennox now sits was a 2-story large home made out of Stone Mountain granite. And they had a cow. They had so much property there. They had a cow out front grazing on the grass with all this acreage. And I remember when Lennox was first built, it was not enclosed. It was an open mall. But that was our first mall, and we was very excited about it. And we used to also ride, when I was very young, out to Stone Mountain, where my grandparents came from, and I buried there in the old cemetery there in Stone Mountain. It's kind of in the city now, but my grandfather, Camp, worked for the railroad. That's before they moved to Atlanta for my grandmother, Camp's children to go to high school. Now my mother was a stalwart curling, and my father married her, as I say, when I was a very young girl. I must have been about 4 or 5. And I used to go visit my grandmother, who lived on Brown Mill Road. It's out somewhere near Lakewood, in that vicinity. And I guess you would call it a plantation, because she owned lots of land. She had her own peach orchard, her own apple orchard, you name it. And they also had people that worked the farm for her. Even had a pond where they could catch their own fish. And I think she canned everything. She made her own ketchup. And her name was Julia Ann Jones. And she married William John Atkinson. At one time, my family, my grandmother's family, her mother and grandmother lived up in some part of Cobb County in Cummins, Georgia. In fact, there's a church that's called Diane's Chapel that's out of Cummins, Georgia, that's still there, but it's in ruins. And her mother and father, he was John. No, this is my grandmother. Anyway, he built the church for his wife, and when later years came, they gave it to the Methodist church there in Cummins. They're supposed to keep it up. But I had a cousin that went up there about 4 or 5 years ago, Maxine, that is Sarah Jones, Jonah, which was Sarah Atkinson before she married Ralph Jonah. And she had a son named Buddy, and she had a daughter named Maxine. And I remember Buddy and I were in the yard playing, and the doctor came, and when he left, Aunt Sarah had a baby. And I thought the babies came with the doctor in a little black bag. And I used to say, ask my mother and father, call the doctor to bring the black bag, because I wanted a brother and a sister. But anyway, I remember as a young girl, my father had, as I say, he had Atkinson Electric and Hall and Decatur and Atkins. And we had 19 acres on Peachtree Dunwoody. The English Tudor House is where Carter and Club comes in. I think I'm repeating myself. And Daddy drove a Packard. But when they stopped making Packards, he was very hurt. Mother drove a Cadillac. But then Daddy started driving Oldsmobiles, and he would let me drive from Decatur down North Blue Hills Road to Roxborough Road, across Peachtree to Peachtree Dunwoody at home when I was very young. And I can see myself now. He'd say, "Daughter, you should have stopped at that stop sign," and so forth and on.
Was it paved? Were the roads paved at that point?
Beg pardon?
Were the roads paved at that point?
Yes, yes. The only time I ever remember the roads not being paved was when you would go out of Atlanta towards Jonesboro, Amara, Georgia, in those vicinities, you would have dirt roads. And we had the big train station downtown, and we had bridges. And we had J.P. Allen's, We had Registines, and we had Davis and Paxson, and the Canada Building. I remember they used to close off the street facing the Canada Building at the Forks on the left-hand side because it did not belong to the city. It belonged to the Canada Building, and they had closed off once a year. And we had Belle Eye's Garage and the Lowe's Grand Theater, which we no longer have. That's where we had the premiere of Gone with the Wind. When my father and mother owned theaters, which two here in Atlanta was Buckhead and Garden Hills, they were invited to the premiere for Gone with the Wind. And I was just, as I said, I was a child then, because I think this was in about 1947 or somewhere in that, no, maybe it's 37.
It was in the late 30s.
Late 30. I know Margaret Mitchell was killed going in or coming out of the 10th Street Theater by a car, I remember that. And her father had a place in the Peters Building where my mother had National and Daddy had National Finance Company in the Peters Building downtown. And it was so strange to walk in it because it had a glass dome roof to it. And it's the only building in Atlanta at that time that I remember having that. And then you could see you could see like the first floor, the second floor, but all while you're standing in the lobby of the Peters Building. But anyway, Rich's was behind there and so forth. Well, I don't know if they had charge accounts or what, but I remember one time Mother had cataracts, so we had a chauffeur that drove and parked up Alabama Street, and we went through Kresge's 10-cent store to go to Rich's. And Mother would say, well, send, I think they sent clothes, send me that. Yes, I'll take that. Oh, and yes, you can send me that. Well, I didn't see any money exchanging. So going back through Kresge's 10-cent store, I picked up a hair ribbon. When we got to the car, my mother said, where did you get the hair ribbon? And I said, back there. And she made me take the hair ribbon back and say, I took this without permission. So when we arrived home, I was told to go to my room. When I was told to go to my room, I did not have a TV, computers, and so forth. I did have a radio because my father owned an electric company, but I was not allowed to play it, nor was I allowed to sit on my twin beds. I had to sit in a chair. I was not allowed to do this. And, and my daddy, he came home, and he came in, and he says, darling, I want to tell you something. And I thought, oh, what have I done wrong now? He says, if you go and steal, do not be known as a petty thief. He said, if you go and steal, be known, steal $1 million or more, so you'll be known as somebody. And I thought, what's $1 million? Having no idea. But I always remember him telling me that, and I would also tell my children this, which was true. I also, when I went to the table to have dinner, when I was home from school, from boarding school, which I went to Mountain Cells also in Macon, and then Western for study art. Well, I remember when I was home, when I was about, I'd say I was 8 or 9 years old, they allowed me to come in the dining room. In the dining room, we had dinner at 6 o'clock, not 5 till 6, or 5 after. And Mother and Daddy would have cocktails in the living room, but at 6 o'clock, you had to have your hair combed, your hands washed, and you set it properly at the dining room table. And you did not speak unless you were spoken to. So one time we had Governor Talmadge, Herman Talmadge, and his wife Betty at our home, and several other people in the dining room. And I was allowed to go to the dining room table. I'm thrilled to death. So I go in, got through dinner, wonderful. Sat there, just we spoke when I was spoken to, yes sir, no ma'am, and so forth. And all of a sudden, Ted, the man that worked for us, he brought in desserts, and I don't know, it was in a crystal plate with stone on it, and it could have been banana, but I don't know what was in there, I don't remember. All I remember is I said, oh, looky, a hair. And my father and mother, they just ignored me and kept talking to our guest. And I thought they didn't hear me. So I said, oh, look, looky, a hair. My father says, excuse yourself and go to your room. Well, yes, sir. May I be excused? I was excused. I went to my room. After the guest left, my father came in there. He says, "Do you know what you did wrong?" I said, "No, sir." Well, first of all, our cook has short, dark hair, and she wears a cap when she cooks. You're the one with the long, dark hair. It was your hair. What you should have done was discreetly put it in your napkin and put it in your lap and said nothing. Well, back in the kitchen, I had to go into the help again. And when we entertained, Mother would entertain in the living room, and the men would go downstairs in the basement, and Governor Talmadge would have a state patrolman out there on Peachtree Dunwoody directing traffic coming in and out of our driveway, and they would crack open a barrel of, I think it was corn liquor, dried peaches or apples and some kind of chips on. But anyway, and the ladies would be having champagne with the cheers in the champagne glasses. And the children were not allowed with the grown-ups. We had to stay in our room or something. And I used to listen to the heat then and hear them, I guess they were telling jokes to me in the basement, and just laughing, and I didn't understand the thing they were saying, but I thought it was funny that they were down there laughing about something. And as I grew up, as I said, my father was the second degree writer, and we belonged to St. Philip, but yet he sent me to Catholic boarding school. Well, when I was about 15, I said, "Daddy, I would like to become Catholic and become a nun." He said, "I don't think so." Well, in my first year of college, on February the 12th, this boy I had met, I went with one of my roommates down to Dublin, Georgia, for a weekend. This guy was playing football, and he'd come up to they could just see me. I could go Saturday, but they were very strict on us. And so he asked me to marry him, and I ran off. It was on February the 12th. I ran off and married the boy, and we went to Dublin, Georgia, and stayed. Our honeymoon was in the next room to his mother and aunt. We were sleeping in his bedroom, and here I was really, at that time, here I was going on 18, but I didn't realize exactly where the situation of babies, they were not discussed. I know when we would want sanitary napkins, we would go to Wyndham Roberts there in Buckhead. There would be a lady there, and we'd say to the lady, "Could we have them?" And she would give them to us wrapped in a brown package, you know. And of course, they were charged to my family. But Atlanta, to go downtown, every lady wore a hat and gloves. I don't think I would ever see anyone, maybe they'd been poor or something, but they wore hats and gloves to go downtown shopping. And it just was one of the old Southern traditions to do. In Virginia Tea Room, we used to go there for lunch when we go shopping. And then there was also a tea room in Rich's. And Dick Rich, they owned the store at that time. And then we would get on a bus or get in the car and go up to Davis and Paxson. And there was Regestein was there, and Joe Regestein ran the Regestein store. I mean, we had the owners of the store. And before the operas, which was held at the Fox Theater, my mother would go and get a Mr. Blackwell a dress. They'd go to order it from Jacobson's. I think it was Jacobson's store downtown. And it wouldn't be another one sold in Atlanta, but they would go to the operas. They had the red carpet and everything. That's before they stopped having the operas. They were going to destroy, I belonged to the Historical Society, and they were going to destroy the Fox Theater, and Southern Bell was going to build a building there. So the Historical Society, we got together and got enough money to buy and preserve the Fox Theater. Also, a big help in the Historical Society, the Swan House, the Coach House, was Sarah and Ray Moore, that lived out there on Havisham. And when I married my second husband, I had 3 children. I had 2 boys and a girl. My first son was named Dewey Edward Keene III. My second son was called Bruce Allen Keene, that's K-E-E-N, from Dublin, Georgia. They became the Lovitts. And then my husband was Dewey Edward Keene second. And then I had a daughter named Ruth Cheryl, like my mother, Ruth Cheryl Keene. I lost my two sons. I still have my daughter who graduated at 5 years from the University of Tennessee. She's an architectural designer, and she is down in Florida designing for kitchen cabinets and bathrooms and so forth, and enjoying herself. And I live now in Franklin, but I miss Atlanta. I miss the theaters and the operas and the plays we used to go to. It was such a treat to come, and I still enjoy it. But Atlanta, we have grown so fast, and the expressway, I remember when they opened it up, I think we got a crowd of us kids, young people. We got on it in Chamblee, Georgia, and it was just like a white ribbon, you know, no cars was on it. We moved one of the cross horses and got on it. And I grew up with the boys in the Buckhead like Buddy Folks and Walt Dunbar and Ray Irvin, and just, I grew up with them there, and they went to North Fulton. Now, I have papers showing that Buddy Folks, whose real name is Douglas L. Folks, I think he was originally, his family was from somewhere in Pennsylvania. But anyway, he moved very young to Atlanta, and they lived in the Garden Hills area. And he got a scholarship from North Fulton, and then he was the fastest one in track, and he taught track and also a teacher at Georgia Tech. He was a city councilman for a number of years here in Georgia County. He had won, he's in the Hall of Fame of Georgia, and he's also in the Hall of Fame as the fastest track thing, or fastest running or something. But I do have an article, I will show it to you. I have a letter opening that was given to my father, compliments of Herman Talmadge. And I have a picture of my father I'd like you to see. He was Clark Gable, I had nothing on him. But speaking of Clark Gable, my father lectured the Battle of Atlanta at the Cyclorama in Grant Park. He lectured the Battle of Atlanta to Carolyn Lombard, Clark Gable, and Vivian Lee. And in those days, they had a flashlight with an arrow, and he would point to the different parts of the canvas for the explaining the Battle of Atlanta. And I used to think it was great to go there and see half of a rail wagon and half of a canvas wagon. I have not been there in a long time, but of course now the zoo has changed. And I remember when we got really big, Johnny Dillback would allow me to go behind and give a banana or something to Willie B. And Willie B had a big rubber tie he would swing in. That's when it was enclosed. That's before they put it outside. And there was a hyena there that knew my father. And every time Daddy would go to the zoo, he would carry a plug of tobacco with him because the hyena was going and Daddy would always give the hyena a plug of tobacco. We always had plenty of bananas at our home. We always had plenty of peanuts at our home. And we had plenty of nice roasts that, where they would, the meat people, they would buy the lines for the lines, the meat and so forth for the lines. They would bring my father and Mr. Dillback real nice roast beef and steaks and so forth. I guess so they can keep the contract out, sure. But there was an Uncle Matt. My father also counted the money that came from the cyclorama. I think it was like, I don't even know if it was 25 cents, but I think he used to sit at the dining room table and say, 2 for me, 1 for the city. 2 for me, 3 for the city. I'm not too sure about that. But he was his nickname was Adcat, and he became quite a politician. And he and Talmadge and so forth used to go deer hunting together in South Georgia. And Daddy lost a many a shirt tail. from deer hunting and missing the deer. But he was a sportsman. Not only was a sportsman with the animal, with deers and fishing and so forth, and frog. I used to hold a flashlight while he shot frogs, and then he'd take them home. And he'd say, darling, don't you want to try the frog legs? Well, I'd hear the cook cooking them, and they're jumping in the skillet. And I said, I don't think so. No. Anyway, I was more of a tomboy. And I know my father, when I was very young, gave me a .32 Smith & Wesson and a .22 rifle. I still have the gun, and I still have the rifle, which is a Winchester. And we would go out, and he'd put targets up on the pine trees back past the stables and all, and for us to shoot the guns. He was showing me how to handle a gun. Never point at anybody unless you use it. Don't play with unloaded guns and so forth. And Mother said, oh, Virgil, y'all are just ruining that pine tree out there. And Daddy says, we got 19 dang gum acres and pine trees, and you're worried about one of them? But he was quite a woman's man, too. And he later divorced my mother and married a Lonnie Pilgrim that worked as a soldier behind the drugstore there off the square in Decatur. She was blonde. And my father didn't allow my mother now. My mother had her hats made at the Peters building. But he did not allow us to wear red shoes, red clothes, or anything pertaining to red. Just maybe like in his eyes or some way. And so when he became engaged to Lonnie Pilgrim, he went out and bought a red, fine red Cadillac, white bound and white top. And so my mother said, and he wouldn't even let us wear red shoes or red hats. And so, but anyway, she was only 2 years older than I was. And, but she was very attractive. And then somewhere, they built a house on Scott Boulevard here in Decatur, where North Decatur Road comes in. It's a brick house, two houses, sits up on the hill. I've not seen it. Sometimes it may not even be there now. But he built that for Lonnie and he. Growing up, we used to could skate down Peachtree Dunwoody and skate on Peachtree because there wasn't that much traffic. And I remember they had the Smiths across, and to stay out of the Army during World War II, my father, he owned the electric company now, but he decided that he had better get some chickens out there where he could claim he was farming. So he and Ted, the black man that worked for us, went out, and you had to vaccinate those chickens under the arm. There were white chickens everywhere behind the stables. And they had this water trough that he thought he'd invented where when the water goes down, it's like a commode, the water would come back up. And he was quite, had an inventive mind, turning signals on cars and so forth. But anyway, and then he went out he got angry with my mother, so he went to join the Coast Guard or something. And they said, Mr. Virgil Atkinson, you are colorblind, you can't join. So then he got rid of the chickens. And he went to work, though he did do the war effort. He went to work at Bell Bomber, where they built the first plane that dropped the atomic bomb was built out at Lockheed at Bell Bomber. And my father said at the time they did not know what type. They knew they were working on a plane, but they didn't know it was going to drop the first atomic bomb. And as I said, he liked packets, and when they stopped making packets, he bought two. He started one. But he finally started driving Oldsmobiles. And as I said, Mother got a new Cadillac. And the only Cadillac place we had in Atlanta then was Capital Motors. And that was across from the Biltmore Hotel downtown. And then we had Wyndham Roberts Drugstore, which at that time was in Buckhead. And we had a delivery van that rode a motorbike, but all of us children in the summer, since I wasn't here in the winter months except holidays, we would gather at Wyndham Roberts, and we didn't call them Cokes, we called them dopes. Give us a cherry dope, or give us a dope. It was a fountain Coke. And And my father owned the Buckhead Garden Hill Theater. I think that's why Milton Newton, Buddy Folks, and Ward Dunbar, and all of them would date me is because I had a pass to get into the two theaters. But anyway, I grew up in Buckhead, and my aunts and uncles lived around the Grant Park area, and my grandmother, Camp, had a house on Washington Avenue when she moved from Stone Mountain. There was a large two-story Victorian house that had a porch upstairs and rocking chairs and all, and a swing on the front porch. And eventually she had to move from Washington Avenue, but the house, I think, still remains today. I think they've gone in there and renovated those old houses. I'm not so sure. And I remember Memorial Drive was called Fair Street. It was not called Memorial Drive. And there was a cemetery. Lots of our old people and ancestors was born in this cemetery that was right in the middle of Fair Street. I think in Mississippi we had the Georgia Baptist Hospital, Grady Hospital, Emory, of course, and we had St. Joseph's Hospital. Of course, Grady is still and is the city hospital. And of course, to go downtown now, I don't recognize some of the places around 14th Street, in that vicinity of 10th Street. It's all developed. It's completely new theaters everywhere. It's completely different. Of course, when I was dating in Buckhead, it would be in the summer months because I would come home from boarding school.
What was the name of the boarding school?
The boarding schools that I went to, the first one I went to was Blessed Cycle Academy in Birmingham, Alabama. And then I went to Mount DeSales in Macon, Georgia. And I graduated from Blessed Cycle Academy, and then I went to Wesleyan to learn to be a commercial artist. As I said before, I had gone to the High Museum to study art in the summer months under Ben Schultz. And, I think the first date I had in Buckhead was with a guy named Milton Newton. They call him Dirty Nookie. I don't know why, but they did. And Buddy Folks, they ran around together. Now, even though the families had money, they did not buy their children when they were seniors in high school or anything like that. They would not buy them a new car or even a used car. They had to make the money themselves. So I remember Milton, I was dating Buddy Folks at the time, and he was dating a friend of mine, Carolyn Tao. And he had an old Ford, four-door Ford, and on the passenger side, we'd have to tie a rope around the two doors to hold it together. But our main thing was going to the theaters. And since my father owned the Buckhead Garden Hills Theater, it was known. If a girl, even someone talked about her, she got a bad reputation. She was not known as a popular girl. I mean, if somebody even just started a rumor whether it's true or not. But no, we didn't even think about, as my father says, if you get pregnant, I'll kill you and the boy. Well, I didn't know exactly how you got pregnant, if a boyfriend kissed me or what, if I was going to get pregnant. So, but anyway, you dated, of course there were some girls that they just, I'm sure this day and time that they would be all right, but the boys would date them on the side when they wasn't dating us, and usually picked up a girl I know of at Pig and Whistle. In fact, they called her Pig Shop Mike, and she'd go off with several guys, you know. And so one day we was riding along, and Milton was driving, and Carolyn was in the front seat with him, and Buddy and I went, folks and I went in the back. And I said, do you know a girl named Pig no, I won't say her name, but I named her name, and they said no. And I said, well, she knows all you boys. And they said, well, my gosh, says, I don't know. And all of a sudden, Milton slams on the brakes and says, you know who they're talking about? Big Shot Mike. Oh, and I said, why y'all call her that? Well, she would go off 5 or 6 boys at a time. And we was just, and they didn't want to, they said, we better not tell you first. And we said, yeah, let's tell us, kept on. But our regular date ended up going to the movies, going to the Varsity, or going to Big Shot, but most of the time it was the Varsity. And as I said earlier, Flossie Mae. He used to have on a woman's hat and all this, and we'd always park where Flossie Mae could wait on us. And he'd say, hey, Mr. Newton. And it was just, we enjoyed life. We would have parties at home, especially when the parents was out of town. I remember one time Jerry Christian's parents was out of town. They lived over there on Tuxedo Road. And we went to their house, it was the boys and girls, and we went to their house, and we made us a large and a silver crystal punch bowl. We made us I guess you'd say, a punch of all kinds of whiskey and rum. But we didn't drink too much of that. We was afraid we'd get in trouble. But most of us girls, when we were 15 years old, started smoking. This was the thing to do, is to smoke. And, of course, when my father found out that I was smoking, he says, well, I'll tell you one thing, you buy your own cigarettes, don't become a cigarette bum. But, and then we went on hay rides. I know one time we went to St. Philip's. They were having a hay ride in the back of this truck. And the gentleman driving the truck, he said, now, none of you girls or boys smoke while we're going from St. Philip's to North Fulton Park. Well, he got up there to drive, and the first thing we all did was light up a cigarette, even though there was straw and hay, more or less, in the back. And I remember Buddy Folks had put on, it was rather chilly, before we went off to school, though, and he put on 2 pair of pants. Now, they wasn't jeans. They didn't wear jeans in pants. And when we got out to North Fulton Park, he said, gosh, it's warm out here. I think I'll take off my pants. And all the girls are going, don't do that, with their hands open, of course. I said, do it. Go ahead. Because I knew that when we started to pick Buddy up, that he said he's going to put on an extra pair of pants over his pants. And so, but we had fun. We had clean fun. And if anybody had a car, now, the one on Tuxedo Road, Jerry Christian, when we had the party, and somebody was trying to call Russia. Now, this was during World War II, and here they are trying to call Russia. We was all thinking we was real big shots. As far as I know, there was no pot or dope of any kind. We was just, well, once in a while we'd have a beer, or maybe parents out of town, we'd go in the liquor cabinet and get us a little drinky food. But as far as I know, no, we didn't have any of that. The boys was mostly interested in sports, and the girls was interested in chasing the ball till she caught him, and then she'd turn and run the other way, so they would think that they caught you. But we had the crowd, that was the Buckhead crowd. Now, the boys in Buckhead did not date the girls from Decatur. Did they like the boys from Decatur or other parts of Atlanta to come to Buckhead and date the girls here? So sometimes they'd have a little war thing about that. And then they got where they threw eggs one time at the theater, and Daddy had to have on Saturday night, and Daddy would have to have a security guard in there to be sure they didn't destroy the screens with the egg throwing. I was usually not home on Halloween night, so I can't tell you what they got into, but we found things to get, small mischief things, like if a boy was dating your girlfriend, if you were a boy and somebody was dating your girlfriend, the boy would take soap and write all over the windows, she's not yours, or something like that. I mean, it was clean fun, and it was good fun. And I remember when some of us, they'd say, tell us girls, there'd be sometimes 6 of us in a car, and they'd say, now y'all gotta help us put some gas in the car. And when we went to the varsity, I think everybody had the chili dog and the orange float. And at that time, I think there was varsity at that time in Athens, Georgia. I'm not sure, but this was before they built the deck, the parking deck, and all that. It was just, I think when Gordy started this, he got kicked out of Georgia Tech. Instead of returning home, he started him a hamburger hot dog place, and that's how the varsity grew into it. And then he became the owner of Gordy Tire Company, and he had a son named Billy, and he had, I forgot what his daughter's name was, but Billy unfortunately was killed on Roswell Road, and the daughter has taken over, and the daughter-in-law, and I think they've done a marvelous job of continuing the varsity throughout parts of Georgia, especially right out of Atlanta, like Gwinnett County and so forth. I can't say that we really got into too much missions. Of course, the boys would always try to
What year was that?
let me wear red. I went down to Rich's. Oh, my mother and daddy wasn't with me. I bought a black dress. It was much, much too old for me at that time. And it had a sort of rhinestone belt. And I bought a red hat that tilted to the right. And it had some kind of red veiling and then some pieces coming down. And some red high heel sling back pumps. I mean, man, I was something. Well, I wore them home, because I knew if I did not, my parents would say, no way are you going to keep that returning. So I wore it home, and then I was on the train with Milton Newton and his brother Dink Newton. They were going to Dink would get in fights, and Milton would jump in with his brother to help his brother, and when he did, they would expel both of them from college. So they got expelled from Georgia. So they were on the train. We were all on the train going. I was going to be going to Birmingham, and they were going on down to Auburn University. And I was so dressed up in that red hat and all that I sat in the club car and I had a drink. When I walked into boarding schools, I guess you could smell it. And the nun says, now, Victoria, you know there is no drinking in our school. I just had one probably very light something, because at the time I didn't drink at all.
How long was the train ride from Atlanta to Birmingham?
Atlanta to Birmingham was about, at that time it was on the string line. Then you had reserved seats. And the train ride, I would say, is about 2.5 hours. And then, of course, my parents would make me go on the train going to the school where I could take my trunk with me. Now, I'd fly home during the meantime, except at the end of school when I would have to bring my trunk back. My mother was very conservative about why should she fly when we'd have to ship the trunk. And that's when I was older. They used to take me to boarding schools when I was small. But as I say, the nuns were very strict on us. And when someone entered the room, we must all stand up, a nun or some grown-up entered the room. And if you could not allow chew gum in the building, I got caught sliding down the banisters. I'd get a demerit, and you get so many demerits. And then they'd pick out the movie you could see. They had a list of the movies that you were allowed to see. So we would have to put on our little stockings and little alligator shoes and a suit. And we would go downtown and rent a lockup there in Macon, Georgia. And we had our loafers in our pocketbook, and we'd take off the stockings, pull out the sloppy Joe sweater, and throw that hat. We had to wear hats in those days. And then we would put some kind of, well, it was kind of like a lotion that was colored, and we put that on our legs. I've gone up Cotton Avenue many a day trying to pull up my stockings to catch on the garter belt because we would go down and just wear those socks, and we'd take off those shoes and throw them in a bus station locker. And then we had the in crowd, and then we'd go to Roy G. Williams on the corner of Cherry Street in Macon and sit there and smoke. We'd got one pack of cigarettes, and we'd sit there smoking the cigarettes, and we had a flunky, we called it. Her name was Laura Newman, and Laura, we would get her to go to the movie picture show, so in case the nuns asked us what movie we saw, we could say that Laura would tell us what the movie was about. And one day we were out on the campus up Mountain South, and Sister Elizabeth says, I'm not going to turn around. There was about 6 of us girls in kind of what you call well, you might say we were the in crowd there. And she says, I'm not going to turn around because if I do, I will look at the girls, but I understand they've been smoking at Roy G. Williams. I'm telling you, we were all standing together, and boy, when she said that, one went one way and I went to the back of the line and one went the other way, because we knew she knew who it was, but we was not going to all be standing together out there. But, and I used to resent it so much, but yet, when I'd come home and started to go back, I couldn't wait to get back to school. Now, we wore uniforms. Nobody outdressed the other. The only time you were allowed not to wear uniforms is when you would go to town on Saturday, if you didn't have demerits. And so many demerits, I think it was 3 demerits, if you left toothpaste in your toothbrush or whatever. It was strict. But everybody wore navy blue skirts, and they could wear loafers with socks. We had to wear white blouses. We had to wear navy blue sweaters, and they had hats that had the initials for Mountain Cells on them, and they were navy blue with gold initials. And each morning we would strip our beds, go down to breakfast, come back and make your bed. We had study hall every afternoon, and you had to take 4 languages to graduate. 2 of Latin. You could take 2 of French or 2 of Spanish, but you had to have 2 of Latin, which we called a dead language, and I think that's the only thing I ever cheated in my life, was that dead language we called it, and wished it stay dead. But anyway, I had 2 of Latin, 1 of French, and 1 of Spanish. But I even traveling the world over, I don't try to use my high school Spanish or anything, for the simple reason is that all they understand is you put money out there and they take it. And so you don't really have to talk, are you going to something you want on the menu? I went to Emory to take an advanced course. Carrie Sufala and I went to advanced course on French. And when we got through at Emory, we couldn't even speak the high school French we knew. So, well, it was exciting anyway. And Marion Hudson, she lived on Club Drive, and she was born and raised in Atlanta. And she used to laugh when you say she was in love with the streetcar conductor. But she married Dr. Paul Hudson. And she says, oh, I thought married to a doctor, I was going to be able to dress up and go to the Brookhaven Country Club and da-da-da. She had to stay home with the children, and he would read the encyclopedia to the children. And then he didn't allow them to go off and have pajama parties or have them at his house. But when he passed away, Marion, she was lots of fun. She went to Russia, and we went on lots of trips together. It was after my divorce, and my parents just saw me for running off and getting married. But when I came back to Atlanta, I didn't realize, since I didn't finish college, if if, you know. So I went to work at Rich's, and they made me assistant buyer of a little salon. The dresses those days in little salons started at $100. I couldn't even afford to hardly, but I did. I was in charge. But there again, I was young, and people resented the fact that they were older that worked under me. But I went to the night school, and I learned Burrell's bookkeeping on this machine. Like you'd have the credits and so forth. No, 4 schedules on that, payroll and everything. So I became an instructor for Burroughs. And I went to Birmingham a little while, then I missed Atlanta, and I came back, and I went to work for Pittsburgh Plate Glass. That was on Memorial Drive, and I was the head bookkeeper there for Pittsburgh Plate Glass. I had the southeastern states, which consisted of Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, all surrounding Georgia and Georgia itself. And I heard that they were looking for a bookkeeper, a man named John Portman that was building the merchandise mart downtown. So on my lunch hour, I went down there, and I had to walk across sawhorses and so forth, even getting to the 6th floor where Mr. Portman's offices were. And I interviewed for the job. There was no office there, just a cement floor and so forth. I interviewed for the job, and then later we used to write thank you notes after we were interviewed for a job. Thank you for that. And so they called and they hired me, and I told them I'd give 2 weeks notice before I would come to work because it was only fair. So anyway, I gave 2 weeks notice, and I went to work for John Portman. And while I was working for John, I used to date the man who was the head of Cotton Producers Association out of Tennessee, and they had an office here on Peach Street. And he would send me an orchid and then call and ask me for a date, which I thought was romantic. But I asked this girl, I said, he'd bring another gentleman, and so we would double date. And so one day she said, Vicki, now I've got some guys coming in from Alabama, and I want you to double date one of them. And I says, look, no way, I don't like these blind dates, no way. Well, I met the ones that was with Ralph Bowman, and I didn't know at the time what Mr. Bowman did, nor did I care. And I just came back from Washington, D.C. on some business, and so we were going, he had some a suite that he kept all the time at the Howell House. So I told him I had to work late that night. Well, I was closing the books, but they still came and picked me up. And I couldn't get out of that date, so that during those days we had silk shanton dresses, and we'd take the jacket off and put on our little pearls. We always wore high heels anyway. And they used to call me the White Glove Kid at the merchandise mart. But anyway, we went to, I forgot what club we went to. Ralph danced with all the ladies at the table except myself. And I danced with all the men except Mr. Bowman, Ralph Bowman. And then when we was going back to, all of us was going back to his suite at the at the Howell House, he started walking up there with me, and he was talking about, I said, well, I was in Washington at that time, and he was, and blah, blah, blah. And his girlfriend says, you should be walking back here with me. And I thought, uh-oh. Well, he started calling me in my office, and Birmingham, Alabama time was different, but he'd call me at 1 o'clock every Wednesday, and he'd ask me for a date. Well, can I come on Friday night and take you to down the block? I'd say, no, I'm busy. And finally, about the third time he called, he says, when are you free? And I got to laugh, and I said, all right, I'll go out to dinner with you this coming Friday night, and which I did. And so he came over Friday, and we went out. My roommate, he took us out to breakfast Saturday, and then breakfast and lunch on Sunday, and he would eat Sunday afternoon returning to Gadsden. And he said, I said, where do you work? And he says, for a transportation company. Well, I didn't know that. So what? So he worked for a transportation company. And then when I found out it was Bowman Transportation, I thought perhaps his father had started it and he just worked for his father. But as time went on, I found out he was the oldest boy. His name was Ralph Martin Bowman. He was really born in Tallapoosa, Georgia, and his father was a sharecropper. And he had 4 sisters. There was Edna, there one named Willie Hubert, they called her Bill, and there was Marlene, and then the youngest one was Martha, but they called her Tot. And so we would go over to Gadsden, and my husband at that time had a Navion that he would fly, and he also, well, he wasn't my husband then, but he also had a Twin Beach, and it was called Old Yellow. But anyway, because and then we had pilots he co-pilot, but we had a pilot that did that. But he just kept pursuing me, and of course I liked that, but I also happened to be in love with another man at the time who was getting a divorce. But I happened to be in love with another man. His name was Pat Gray. He originally played football all for Lanier in Macon, Georgia, and he moved to Griffin, Georgia. And he had a showroom in the merchandise mart that sold La Lique, which is a very expensive crystal from France. And I had to go around when they're behind on their rent and so forth and go talk to them and so forth. And so one time he asked me would I like to go out to play darts at this place and have a drink, and I said yeah. And I don't know, I just fell in love with him. Well, at that time I had met Ralph and I was dating him. He'd come over on Friday nights and we were coming out of some club, and I had bought a pair of evening slippers that really had glass heels, high heels, and I bought them at J.P. Allen's. And I remember I got up on this wall and was walking down the wall, and he said, honey, you're going to hurt yourself. Of course, after you're married, he said, get up that damn wall, you fool. But this was then. And I thought I was just doing so cute walking that wall with those glass heels on my shoes. But we would go listen to different people that was popular at the time. And we went to a place, Joe Dale's was downstairs, and it was the Imperial Hotel. I forgot the name of the room upstairs. It was a nightclub, but they had first-class acts there. And then this guy named Dick Eccles Crowder, one time they had a strip up there, and he says, I bet I can get a date with her. Well, he was with Abe the date, and we all bet him, there's about 10 of us, we bet him he could not get a date with the stripper. And he put $50 in a note and wrote, will you have dinner with me after the show or something? And she took the $50 and wrote him back, no, I will not. His father was a sharecropper. He was born in Tallapoosa. They moved to Boaz, Alabama, where he was still a sharecropper, his father. And so Ralph would haul, during the summer and after schools, he would haul cherub. I think that was the name of it. It's what the rock they put on the road before they paved them. And he worked for $1 a day room and board. And he'd put on his overalls on Saturday, if he had Saturday off, and go down to Boaz and look outside the theater to see if there was any certain... That's when they used to have the pictures outside of certain scenes in the movies. And if he didn't see anything he liked, he would buy him a Baby Ruth and a Coke and sit on the curb and drink that and save the rest of his money. Well, his first truck was a flat Chevrolet bed truck, and he parked it on Boaz around the courthouse. So he told me a little about how Bowman started, and I said, oh, I thought maybe you inherited it from your father. He said, no, as I said before, he was hauling something they put on roads, sheriff or something like rocks before they paid. And he worked for $1 a day room and board. And as I've already said, he would go in, if he'd go into Boaz, if he didn't see something he wanted to see in the movies, he'd buy him a Coke and Babe Ruth and sit there and eat that and go back. But when he was 18, he got his first Chevrolet bed truck, and he had sides on it. And they called it a flatbed. And he put it at Boaz courthouse, and he said, "We'll haul anything." He meant cotton seeds, furniture, to make money to pay for the truck. Because he was only 18, his father had to sign for the truck. His father being a sharecropper, as Ralph said, if I had not worked and made the money, my father could not have afforded to pay for the payments on the truck. But he says, I thought I never was going to get to be 21 years old, so my father didn't have to sign for my trucks. Well, he finally, and back in the days when he incorporated Bowman, which was in Gadsden, Alabama, he had to buy road rights. You couldn't drive their truck just anywhere you wanted to. And anyway, we got married and was married 28 years. And but I know one time he bought Fuller Motor Lines out of Columbia, South Carolina, and I went up there and I looked at the terminal, I looked at the equipment, and I said, "You paid how many millions for this?" He said, "Vicki, I was bought it for the road rights because you." And then he made it Atlanta because I would not go to Gadsden when we became engaged. And he told me I could go build any kind of house I wanted in Gadsden. I said, I was born and raised in Atlanta. I'm going to stay here. I won't marry you. And he kept wanting to go on because our terminal was over near the airport. He kept wanting to live in that part of Atlanta, and I kept saying, no, I was born and raised in Buckhead. I don't want to live over there. But he put on his khakis, and he never would wear tennis shoes when we go fishing, but he put on his khakis and a tailor-made short-sleeve plaid shirt, monogram here, and his hush puppies. That's what he'd wear when he was off from work. Always a suit and tie and fortune shoes and so forth. Tailor-made shirts and suits. And this real estate lady would come and pick us up at my townhouse that I was renting. It was on North Decatur Road. And we would ride all over in southeast Atlanta and so forth, and she'd show us houses. And Ralph said, no, that's not what I want. And she said, well, how much do you want to pay for the house? And Ralph says, when we see what we want, we'll discuss price then. And I kept saying, I don't want to live anywhere. I don't want to live anywhere but Buckhead. So we finally bought a house in Kingswood off of Paces Ferry Road. And it was under construction. And then, therefore, my husband wanted a huge master bedroom. And I remember one time the men said, what is this room going to be? And somebody says, I don't know. And one of them said, well, it's as big as my house. And then I didn't realize the money he had. And then we bought a new, went out to Wichita, and where he bought a new Twin Beach. It was jet propelled. Now, when this happened, he could not co-pilot that. But we'd get in the Navy yard and fly around, and he'd say, put it over that bridge, and I'd try to fly over that bridge. And then one day he says, now I want you to keep this needle in horizontal. If it goes up, you push down on the wheel and blah, blah, blah. Well, I had the plane going like this. I said, take it, Raph, take it. I'm going to kill us. He says, turn the wheel loose. I said, take it. He says, turn it loose. I said, all right. I turned it loose. Okay, we're going to die. And he just leveled itself out. I was overriding is what I was doing. But anyway, after we got the Sablina jet, he could not fly, be co-pilot of that plane. So we called him, his name was Al Dawes, D-A-W-E-S. And his wife was named Lillian, and they had a daughter named Wanda. But they were on call 24. He was on call 24 hours a day, and we called him El Capitan Then we had another boy that they called Junior, and Junior was the co-pilot. And then when we got the jet that had to go every year, I forgot where it was, to be checked out on the plane each year. Of course, my children were in military. My boys was in military school, and we had an adopted daughter, Sue Ann Bowman, in November. Every time that's when we got married, was in November. I really, at the time, I didn't know where I wanted to marry him or not, but he was the best thing that ever happened in my life. He was a good man. I liked to fish. He liked to fish. He liked to watch football games. He liked to go to football games. And I remember I went. He let me have the plane, and Carolyn Newton, Milton Newton, and my daughter and 2 sons and myself. We went up to Indianapolis. I'd never seen the Indianapolis race, and the manager, our terminal manager, picked us up there and took us to the race. And they weren't going to let us land, but El Capitan came on and said we were low on fuel, so they was going to send us to another airport. But then we mixed Bloody Marys to take with us, but somehow now we came home and we hadn't even had them. We had a hard time getting back to the airport for the traffic. And then I said, oh, let's go up in the lounge and have a drink. And our chief pilot says, Miss Bowman, no way. We got to get in line to fly out of here because so many people had flown in. But Ralph started, he became the largest individual truck line in the United States. And when he built his executive offices in Atlanta, and he built a terminal here, a large terminal in Atlanta, he thought that he was the largest terminal in the United States. But he found out in Dallas, Texas, they had 2 more loading doors than he had. I said, well, it's still under construction. Put your 4 more. He said, no. And it was advertised as the largest terminal east of the Mississippi. And it was on the cover of the Truckers magazine. And I was in there with several of the governor's wife. And then we went to Biloxi. We went to Montgomery the first time I went with him. And I had to borrow a suitcase from my roommate. Her boyfriend owned a jewelry store. But anyway, she had a nice suitcase. And we drove in his car, and I was driving coming back and got a ticket, and Ralph just threw it in the glove compartment. I guess he'd take care of it later. But we had separate rooms. I had the suite, and he would room. We flew in with the pilots. And I realized the reason he probably did that is because he wanted to marry me, and he wanted Jack Cole, which he bought Jack Cole out of Birmingham, Alabama. And we were married at the time. And he bought Jack Cole, and when he bought several other truck lines. And he bought them really for the road rights, which later on became, the trucking became deregulated. And in other words, you could drive anywhere you wanted to. But he would keep the parts of the rights he would buy and sell off to others. Like Atlanta would be the hub of Bowman transportation. And then when it became deregulated, the government did refund some of the money each year to Bowman Transportation. Show you how smart he was. I had a share of Bowman Transportation. His mother had a share. And when he incorporated in Gadsden, we had to sign those shares back to him because he was the sole owner. Then he took the money that he had paid taxes on and started a B&W Corporation. Now B&W would buy if they were going to build a terminal in Tampa, which was, as I said, the largest truck line in the United States. B&W would buy the land. They would lease it to Bowman Transportation, and Bowman built the terminal on it. He was a very smart guy. He barely finished high school because he used to, when he was plowing in the fields, he used to say that Mule was smarter than he was because he was ahead of him. And his mother says, when he was young, says, we'd go down there and find him under a tree reading a book. But he was a self-made man. And he didn't wear lots of flashy jewelry or anything. To be around him and all, you would know that you'd think he had nothing. You know, I mean, he was not the kind that said, well, I've got to own this, I own that. As I said, they used to think the caretaker was Mr. Bowman. But he liked to fish. I had my boat, he had his boat. And I think I discussed that once before. So I won't go over that again. But Dr. Waldo Powell from Emory was a friend of ours. And his wife and children would come down. And one of my sons, he said, Mother, the house we had in Georgetown was like a U-shaped house with a pool in the middle, and at the end had a flower box I kept parsley growing in. And he said, Mother, he says, he was down visiting, and he says, can I plant some things around the guest house? We had a guest house, and out there in that flower there at the end of the pool. And I said, why, yes. I thought, well, that'll give him something to do besides fish. Well, Dr. Powell and him and several other people from Kraus Food, Dan Andrews, they were from Atlanta, they went to Texas. He was head of Kraus Food and so forth. That we didn't move furniture. We didn't have the tie downs and all. We were commercial movers. But anyway, commercial products like Clorox, which you'd have to be sure rode in the nose of the trailer where it wouldn't break open. And I forgot what they call that, but it wasn't Clorox. But anyway, and Kraus Food, of course. But we would have people at our home, some people from New York, and I said, okay, he was ahead of the flowers and stuff up there. And all of a sudden, this green things kept coming up, and I thought, around the guest house and in the pool, with all these guests coming in and out of our home. But I thought, what that is. And so finally, my daughter called, and I said, Cheryl, Bruce has planted some kind of greenery, and I don't know what it is. She said, well, Mother, what does it look like? And I said, wait a minute. And I went out and got it. And I said, she says, does it have 5-finger leaves? And I said, yeah. She said, Mother, that's pot. I said, it's what? It's pot. I said, oh, my Lord. Boy, you talking about somebody getting out there and getting that around from the guest house, and I didn't know what it looked like. I never bought any pot. But my son had planted pot. Anyway, and my other son, as I said, he was more interested in chemistry and things. But he didn't make any, he was not anywhere near, he would not fool any kind of narcotics. Bruce, unfortunately, that's how I lost my son. He did, and we'd send him to places to dry out and let him stay with us. And then, anyway, it was unfortunate. But both my sons are where they should be, in heaven with the Lord. But I guess he's saying, oh, Lord, I got one. And then my husband goes up there and he says, oh, the football games and all have 3 TVs where you can see all the games. But we used to go down to New Orleans, and we would go to the Sugar Bowl. The Sugar Bowl. And then we'd go some years, we'd take a plane load of people and go down to Miami and go to the Orange Bowl. Oh, we had tickets because we had them for customers also. But the only thing was, Ralph would say, let's just stay in, and I think they showed football all that weekend or something. Well, us ladies, we'd go down to Coral Gables and shop and go have our hair done. But the men had 3 TVs brought in. One day they'd use our suite. One day they'd use Jack Barrett, who had Barrett All Company in Savannah, and then Marie, his wife. And they would use, there'd be about 6 couples of us. And but anyway, we would stay in the room, and us ladies would go shopping, and they would have all these TVs going. They have them sent in so they could see all the games that was going on. One time, I don't know if any of you would remember this, but we had Joe and Verdi from Gadsden, Alabama. They were like old maids, I guess you might say. They got married late in life, had a house. I think it was Joe's second marriage, but anyway, had a house furnished and everything before they got married. And I think he worked for Goodyear there in Gadsden. And so a crowd of us was in New Orleans, and we decided we was going to the Mile My Club, which is where the male impersonators would dress as females. And so Joe had gone downstairs to get a paper. So the men decided they were going to pay one of them to make a pass at Joe. Joe was kind of getting bald in the back, and his wife was sitting there listening to it and laughing about it, everything else. I don't think. So when we got there, and she realized that these men actually looked like beautiful women, and the one they had paid to make a pass at Joe, the guy said, "Hey, I don't think he's put it on thick enough." So they went over and talked to him, and Ralph sent one of the pilots over. The pilot, El Capitan, came back and says, Chief says, they said they wasn't coming back over the table. Said that woman next to him she was mean to them. Mm-hmm. Well, she knew what they were going to do. She should have been in with the crowd, which I don't think she realized how much they did look like ladies, gorgeous ladies. So we had a big laugh. He liked to fish, and he wasn't much of killing animals. And we had a German Shepherd. Well, his real name, when I bought him from my oldest son, Ed, his name was Phantom. But Ed moved into an apartment here in Atlanta that would not allow pets. So I put him in the kennel out in Vinings, and they called one day and they said, Miss Bowman, the dog's been out here 2 months. You still want us to keep the dog? And I said to my husband, please let me take the dog to Florida. And he says, no. So finally I put the dog on the plane, and the caretaker picked the dog up in Daytona. And somehow or another, he couldn't get in touch with the chief to pick up the dog, Phantom. And so he had the terminal manager to pick him up and keep him until the next day and water him and feed him. And he had, a long time ago, he had a little Boston Bulldog named Butch. And he started, and somehow that German Shepherd knew my husband wasn't too, to pet him or something. But he started coming up to him, and my husband did. And he says, called him Butch. And I said, why are you calling him Butch? He said, that's the name of the dog I used to have I was so crazy about. So we put him on the plane to bring him back to Atlanta. And there was the Save Line jet. Well, I had to pull him up the steps to get him in the plane. And he rode right by that door. And Ralph said, don't let him go up there where the pilots are. And I says, he knows he came in that door, and I think he's going to stay there. Well, anyway, when we landed in Atlanta, I got him off. Well, he was ready to come off. The next time we started to go to Florida, what did Butch do? He went up the steps before we was ready to get aboard the plane. He got on the sofa in the plane, and so at Bowman, when we stopped, he got off and everything. So one time we had guests going with us, Carolyn and Milton Newton, and they got to the airport before we did. And Hangar Ones, where we used to put the Peachtree cab, but the pigeons got bad out there, and it being a jet, we put it at Hangar One out at Havel. So anyway, when they got there, Ralph said, did the pilots take care of your luggage? They said, yes. And Milton says, well, I put the hanging bag on the sofa. The dog had already got aboard the plane. And Ralph said, well, that's Butch's seat. I'm afraid you're going to have to get that out of there. And he got where he was crazy about the dog, and he'd take him. he'd get in that Riviera beer. And the funniest thing was, the German Shepherd got so big, he'd sit over in the passenger seat, and Ralph would be driving and taking him out to the office with him. All you could see was a big old German Shepherd because the dog was so big. But he would go out there, and my husband had a conference desk, and people would come in there trying to sell them tractors or trailers or something. And Butch would take a nap under that, and he'd come out and stretch. Now, my husband went down the hall to the conference room onto the president's office or something. Butch would come out, and the secretary would say, "Hey, Butch," and he'd just go past him, and he'd find wherever my husband was and lay at his feet. And, of course, Ralph just thought that was great, and he really was crazy about the dog. But towards the end of school, some kid in a flashy convertible came over Dunbarton Road, and my dog was daring the German Shepherd across the street to put one toe across the line. In fact, he dug a hole behind the boxwoods, and the gardener said, "Mr. Bowman, he's out there." Somebody came over, and Jerry Christian, Ann Christian, and Gilmer Christian lived next door to us on Dunbarton Road, and this car came over the hill and hit my German Shepherd, and he died under their mailbox. And Gilmer came over to tell my husband, and Ralph came back, and he says, and of course I had on this flowing negligee and junk. He says, "Vicki, I think you better come up here in the entrance hall. Gilmer's got something to tell you." And I said, "What?" I went up there, and he says, "Vicki, I hate to tell you, but your dog Butch is out there under our mailbox." He says, "And he's dead." And I said, "No, he's not. No, he's not." I went flying out there, down those circle staircases, and I'm saying, "You're not dead. You're not dead." Well, he was. And we buried him out here off of Bolton Road, and my husband had a tombstone and a thing made saying, "Our beloved son, Butch Bowman." Because it's a pet cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
We
touched on the morning that you found your husband.
Oh, well, when I found my husband, George, our housekeeper, was on Saturday, and she brought a glass of water and his medicine by the side in the library. And so I called. We had an intercom system. I said, "George, is Mr. Bowman up yet?" She said, "Yes, and he don't look right." So I went flying down the hall, and he was sitting there with one TV on, and one hand on the arm of the chair, the other one in his lap, and he had on his bedroom shoes with socks. He didn't have his, he did look like he was asleep, but I felt of him, and he was cold. I called the police. They came, and then they sent for I told them that he would be buried in Gadsden, Alabama, because that's where his mother and so forth was buried. And I knew he had planned to be buried there, and I also was supposed to be buried there, but that's then. Well, the Wednesday, we went to Powell and Paul's. It was Coney at one time, then it became Powell and Paul's down there at Northside Drive and Paces Ferry in the Wyndham and Robert Shopping Center. And Wednesday night, he never talked, even when he was fighting Jimmy Hoffa. He said, "I built this truck line and nobody's going to tell me how to run it." Although the drivers belong and the dock cap belong to the same thing as the steel union, which was the same thing that Jimmy Hoffa would have given them in the way of benefits. But my husband couldn't see him working all his life to build this truck line and letting Jimmy Hoffa take it over. Now, he told me Jimmy Hoffa hadn't seen his shoes out in the ocean when he came up dead. And somehow, I'm not going to say who but somebody he was close to, they think they had this done, but I won't mention who. But Jimmy Hoffa, they owned Atlanta Cabana, and he had a meeting with my husband one time, and there was my husband, his president, and his lawyer, and his president at that time was a Mr. Lockridge. And so they were meeting at the cabana, and my husband's attorney said, Mr. Hoffa, what is it you want from Mr. Bowman? And Jimmy Hoffa was a short guy. Says, I want him off of my back. It's the other way around. But he couldn't see. They dynamited some by trucks and so forth, but my husband could not see working from the time he was a young man and working as hard as he did, and somebody coming in and telling him how to run his business. So we never did go with the Teamsters. But anyway, when I found him dead, I called the police. They came out, and I went off the library. There's a little bar section. I went in there, and then when the paramedics came and they put a sheet over him, that's when I couldn't stand it. And the phone rang, and I picked up the phone, and I was upset. I said, hello. And they said, who is this? I said, it's Vicky. Well, I said, who is this? Well, it was Ralph's sister. Well, the one Martha, the young one they called Todd. And she said, let me speak to Ralph. And I said, Todd, I hate to tell you, but your brother has passed away sometime early this morning or late Friday night. Well, let me speak to Georgia. And the housekeeper, I gave her on the phone, and she says, don't let her take, here we was married 28 years, don't let her take anything out of that house. Don't let her have any. So, anyway, Georgia, she told the policeman, take me down to the Grady Hospital. Miss Todd told me to stay with Mr. Bowman until they got over here. The policeman said, lady, we work the Buckhead area. We wouldn't take you anyway. So she went up to the ambulance thing and says, y'all let me go with Mr. Bowman down to the Grady Hospital. And they said, no ma'am, we will not. Well, I was just dazed out. I was just standing there. I didn't even hardly know what was going on. I just was so like, hey, what's wrong? But then she said, Miss Bowman, take me down, take me to Buckhead and let me catch a bus down to Grady. Well, not thinking, I said, all right, I drove to Buckhead. When she got up there, she says, take me down there on Northside Drive. I think that'd be better to get that bus. I got down there, I said, Georgia, get out of this car, and I mean now. Well, my friends came to the house, and Faye and her mother, Idoma, and her mother-in-law, Idoma, Hicks, and Faye, and then Sarah Moore, and Marion Hudson, Carrie Sue Fowler. They all came by to see how I was doing, you know, friends that we played cards and had fun together with. But, and it was a sad loss, but the Wednesday before he died, he never talked too broadly his troubles on me. He'd say, bring something funny that happened. When Jimmy Hoffa was doing all these things, he'd say something funny that happened. But that Wednesday night, he said, I don't like my new president. Ray Huffman was his name. He says, I said, well, honey, what are you going to do? He says, I said, you going to fire him? He says, no, I'm going to give him a year's salary and let him go. And he says, and my brother-in-law, which was married to Bill, his name was Don Puckett. And my brother-in-law is retired from the United States Army Air Force, and he went to work for my husband. And all the sisters or their husbands worked for my husband in different parts of Alabama. So he was put in charge of equipment. And Ralph says, he thinks he's spending the government's money. I don't like the way he's doing equipment. He was smart in some ways like this. He had strick and flew off at his trailer, his trailers. And Brown and Great Dane would bid, like if he was going to buy 500 trailers, they would put their bids in for them. And sometimes they'd be lower than strick or flew off. Mm-hmm. My husband taught me a lot. And I said, well, why don't you put Great Dane on, another trailer in there? He says, Vicky, that's why I let them bid. I bring strick and flew off down. But if I put another trailer in the fleet, that means that all my shops would have to carry parts for that. Very smart man, very smart. And he knew that business from the ground up. He should have. You know, he started when he was about 16 years old, earning money to buy his first flatbed Chevrolet truck.